I live out in Dorset, Vermont, a quiet, secluded corner tucked deep in the mountains. Out here, it feels like the world has forgotten us. Thick forests press in from all sides, and the air carries that damp, earthy scent of moss and pine. There are countless trails carved through the mountains, winding through trees that tower like sentinels. I've come to know them well. Almost every day, I'll walk or jog along one of them, sometimes just to clear my head, sometimes to chase the silence. Conveniently, there's a path right through the woods behind my house. If you push past the low branches and brush, you'll find yourself stepping onto a trail I use all the time. That path has become my personal escape, a stretch of wilderness I've come to trust. One evening, after getting home from work, I slipped out of my dress clothes and into my running gear. By 6:45, the sky was bruised with early dusk, and the air had that late summer stillness. I clipped on Murphy's leash, my loyal coonhound, and together we set off toward the trail. We started slow, just walking at first, letting the rhythm settle in. After about 5 minutes, we eased into a light jog. Murphy trotted alongside me, her paws nearly silent against the dirt. She's always a pleasure to run with, never pulls, never strays. Just stays close and steady, perfectly in sync with my pace. The trail was wide enough for both of us, the trees flanking us like a tunnel of green, and for a while, everything felt right, peaceful, familiar. I've always had this habit of looking up when I run, scanning the treetops, watching the sky change, letting my thoughts drift with the wind. Maybe that's why I didn't notice Murphy had stopped until I felt the sudden tug of her leash, jerking gently against her collar. I came to a halt and turned around, confused. Murphy was frozen, her body tense, eyes locked on something behind us. Her ears were lifted and twitching, the way hound dogs' ears do when they catch a sound they don't quite like. They gave these faint little bounces, like radar dishes tuning in. We were deep in the woods after all. It could have been anything. Maybe a deer shifting through the underbrush, or a squirrel darting through leaves. Could have been another jogger even. Plenty of harmless explanations. Still, there was something about the way Murphy stood there, completely rigid, like a statue carved from instinct, that gave me pause. I gave the leash a light tug and called out, "Come on, girl," nudging her forward, trying to get us moving again, but she didn't budge. Her paws held the ground like anchors, and her gaze stayed fixed behind us, like she knew something I didn't. I humored her at first, crouching slightly and whispering reassurances, thinking she just needed a moment to sniff out whatever sound she'd heard. But then, I saw it. There, down the path, the way we'd come from, stood a man. He wasn't trying to hide, quite the opposite. He was just there, standing still, watching us. His posture was relaxed, almost too casual, and his eyes didn't waver. He wasn't looking around or checking his phone or enjoying the forest. No, his gaze was fixed squarely on us, on Murphy and me. A cold ripple ran up my spine. Trying to brush off the sudden tightness in my chest, I raised a hand and gave him a small wave, hoping a bit of friendliness might smooth over whatever awkwardness hung in the air. No response, just the same unmoving stare. I looked back down at Murphy. Her hackles weren't raised, but her body language screamed discomfort. "Come on," I muttered, giving the leash another tug. Finally, she started moving, hesitantly at first, then easing back into a slow jog at my side. Still, even as we picked up speed, she couldn't resist glancing back, once, then again, her eyes trailing the figure we left behind. And though I didn't look back with her, I felt it, the weight of eyes still on us, heavy and unblinking. It wasn't unheard of, honestly. People on these narrow forest trails often paused or lingered when they saw me and Murphy coming. Some folks just weren't comfortable passing close to a dog, even one as calm as her. Usually, they'd just hang back until we were far enough ahead. I'd seen it plenty of times. Still, there was something different about this. Most of those hikers or joggers came out earlier in the day, when sunlight still spilled between the trees and shadows didn't stretch so long. But now, the trail was slipping into twilight. The edges of the woods were starting to blur into murkier tones, and usually by this time, the path was empty, quiet. I realized I hadn't even seen whether that first man had waved back. After I'd lifted my hand to greet him, my eyes had gone straight back to Murphy, tugging her gently to move. Maybe he had waved, maybe not. I didn't look long enough to know.
At that point, though, I still wasn't alarmed. Not really. The whole thing just seemed off, but not threatening. That was until barely a minute later, Murphy suddenly froze again. Only this time, she didn't just stop. She barked, loud, sharp, echoing off the trees like a gunshot in the stillness. I followed her line of sight immediately, already tense. And there he was, another man. Up ahead this time, walking slowly toward us down the trail. Unlike before, I caught sight of him right away. No surprise, no ambiguity, just a man in the distance, getting closer with each step. I raised a hand again, offered a friendly wave. He didn't wave back. I stayed where I was, tightening my grip on Murphy's leash, guiding her close to my side. She was stiff, barking again, tail stiff behind her. I kept expecting the man to just pass us, do what normal people do on a trail, nod, say hello, move on. But the closer he got, the slower he moved. Something was wrong with the way he walked, like each step required thought, like he was deliberately drawing it out. When he was finally within earshot, I forced a smile and called out, trying to make things normal again, to dispel whatever weight was beginning to build in my chest. "She's friendly," I told him, patting Murphy's side. "You can go ahead and pass." I waited. Murphy stood firm, still staring him down, ears high and body taut. And the man kept coming, slower, closer, and still without a word. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. The man ahead didn't stop, didn't blink, just kept walking, slow, deliberate steps, his eyes locked on mine. His face was blank, cold, unreadable. No curiosity, no acknowledgement, just stillness. Then Murphy spun around, barking furiously in the opposite direction, back behind us. My stomach dropped. I whipped around and nearly lost my balance from the jolt of panic that surged through me. The man from earlier, the one who'd been watching us silently down the trail, was now right there, no more than 5 feet away, closing in step by slow step. Everything snapped into sharp focus. This wasn't random. This wasn't harmless. These men had planned this. In the handful of seconds between that realization and what happened next, my mind screamed to act, but it was too late. I felt it, 2 arms suddenly wrapping around me from behind, rough, tight, trying to pin me in place. At the same moment, the man I'd been watching ahead, the one I'd spoken to, suddenly rushed forward, charging at me with a dead-eyed intensity. Murphy's barking transformed into something primal, deep, snarling growls ripped from her chest, feral and vicious. A split second later, one of the men shrieked in pain, a raw, panicked cry tearing through the woods. Murphy had clamped her jaws down on his leg, hard, and she wasn't letting go. That pain must have broken his grip because I felt his arms release from around me in a sudden jolt. Without wasting a second, I threw myself forward, slamming into the man who had been approaching head-on. I hit him hard enough to take us both to the ground, the impact jarring through my shoulder. Murphy was still locked onto the other man's leg, shaking and growling like a wild animal. It took a burst of strength and everything in me shouting her name to finally get her to release him. And the second she did, we ran. I didn't look back. I didn't care what those two were doing or if they were regrouping. I just ran, my legs pounding the trail, Murphy bounding beside me, teeth still bared, her ears pulled back. The man I tackled didn't chase us. I think after his friend got mauled, he realized they'd lost control of the situation. They were outmatched. But I wasn't sticking around to find out if they had backup. We sprinted the entire way, the trees flying past in a blur,
the sky above darkening fast. What normally took me 15 minutes, we did in 5. When we finally burst through the woods and onto the grass behind the house, I dropped to my knees and checked Murphy immediately, my hands shaking as I ran them over her fur, searching for blood, for cuts, for anything. Nothing, not a scratch. She was fine, shaken, growling low, but unhurt. I pulled her into me, burying my face into her neck. I couldn't stop thanking her. She's 9 now, still strong, still sharp, still the reason I got out of those woods alive. And to this day, I see it as nothing short of a blessing that on that night, of all nights, I brought Murphy with me into the forest.
My pit bull, Callie, sleeps in my room with me every night. She's my shadow, my comfort, and most nights, my reassurance that everything is fine. My bedroom is a loft, raised above the rest of the house, kind of like a watchtower perched above the ordinary. It gives me a little sense of distance from the world below. The layout is cozy, but there's one part of it I've never quite warmed up to: the closet. It's huge, unusually large actually, and built a few feet off the ground. Elevated. To get into it, I have to use a small stepping stool that's always tucked off to the side. Inside? Just old stuff. Childhood toys mostly, things I haven't touched in years. But even with that knowledge, even knowing it was just plastic and stuffed animals and forgotten board games, it still gave me an odd feeling sometimes, like something was waiting in the dark, just behind the door. One night, I woke up to the low, guttural sound of growling. I sat bolt upright in bed, heart immediately pounding. Callie was standing in the middle of the room, facing the closet. Her posture was tense, head slightly tilted upward. She wasn't barking, just letting out a quiet, steady growl. And she kept staring at that closet door like she sensed something I couldn't see. I was only 14, and in that moment, every spooky story I'd ever heard, every strange dream I'd ever had came flooding back to me. Just thinking about what might be on the other side of that door made me uneasy. "Callie," I whispered, my voice a little unsteady. I gently patted the bed. "Come here, girl." She paused for a moment, then finally turned and jumped onto the bed beside me. I reached out and ran my hand along her back, trying to calm both of us down. She licked her lips a few times, then slowly quieted, her attention shifting away from the closet and toward me. Her body eased a little. I glanced toward the closet. The door was still closed. Everything was quiet. Nothing had moved. But somehow, the shadows inside felt just a bit heavier now, like the room was holding its breath. Still, Callie had calmed down. Whatever had unsettled her, it had passed. "Probably just your imagination," I mumbled, half to her, half to myself. With her curled up beside me now, her body warm against mine, I felt my heart begin to slow. The room was quiet again, familiar. Eventually, I drifted back to sleep, Callie right next to me. But part of me couldn't shake the image of her standing there, staring up into that shadowed closet, growling at something I never saw. I woke up again, no idea how many hours had passed, but this time, it wasn't growling that stirred me. It was barking, loud, frantic, echoing through the loft. Callie was in the middle of the room again, hackles raised, tail stiff, barking with everything she had. And once again, she was facing the closet. I sat up, startled and groggy, heart thudding in my chest. "Callie, shut up," I whispered, harsher than I meant to. She paused, glanced back at me for just a second, her body still tense. Then, we both heard it. Clatter. The unmistakable sound of a jar of Legos tumbling over. That harsh, plasticky crash, sharp and chaotic, came from inside the closet. My blood ran cold. Callie lost it. She lunged at the stepladder, barking louder now, frenzied. Her front paws slammed against the wall as she tried to climb, scratching at the wood, trying desperately to reach the door. Her barking wasn't warning anymore. It was panic. And then I heard the creak of my bedroom door swinging open. My dad stormed up the stairs, voice raised and sharp. "What the hell is going on in here?" I pointed at the closet, my voice shaking. "Check the closet, there's someone in there." Without hesitation, he rushed past Callie, who was still barking wildly, and climbed the stepladder 2 steps at a time. His hand shot out, grabbed the closet handle, and yanked the door open. What happened next is burned into my memory. The moment the door swung wide, a figure burst out. A man, jeans, a black pullover hoodie, black beanie, came flying out of the closet and slammed straight into my dad, knocking him clean off the stepladder. My dad hit the ground hard, landing on his back with a painful thud that made me cry out. Before I could even move, the man bolted, racing out of my room, down the stairs, and vanishing into the house below. Callie stopped barking for just a moment, watching him flee, then growled low in her throat like she wanted to chase but didn't leave my side. I just sat there, frozen, my heart hammering in my chest, the closet door still swinging open in slow, creaky arcs behind us. But Callie wasn't done. She tore off after him, her nails skittering across the floor as she lunged down the stairs with a fury I'd never seen in her before. From where I sat frozen on the bed, I heard the pounding of their footsteps, and then a scream. A sharp, panicked cry of pain. The man hadn't made it far.
My dad and I rushed down the stairs, hearts racing, feet slamming each step. When we reached the living room, the sight that met us was something I'll never forget. Callie had him. She was latched onto his arm, her jaws locked tight, blood soaking through his sleeve and already dripping onto the carpet in thick, dark blotches. The man was on the ground, groaning and writhing, one leg bent awkwardly beneath him. Apparently, she'd bitten him twice, once in the leg to stop him and now again in the arm to keep him there. My dad jumped into action, grabbing Callie firmly by the collar and forcing her to let go. Her teeth unclenched with hesitation, and the low growl rumbled in her chest as he pulled her back. Her eyes never left the man. "Take her upstairs," my dad barked, his voice sharp and urgent. "Now." I did what I was told, guiding Callie, still tense and alert, back up to my room. I closed the door behind us, but I stayed right by it, heart pounding, ears straining to hear every sound. Downstairs, I could hear my dad on the phone. His voice was clipped, intense. "Yes, he's still here. My dog bit him, twice. You need to send someone now." The man was still moaning in pain when the cops arrived. I could hear their calm voices as they entered, the sound of heavy boots against the floor, and then the soft shuffle of them lifting him to his feet. They brought him outside together. 10 minutes later, an ambulance pulled up and whisked him away, bloody, broken, and caught. The days that followed were a blur of police reports, legal conversations, and quiet tension in the house. My dad spent hours on the phone with lawyers, filing paperwork, speaking in that low, serious voice he used when things were important. He didn't tell me much about what was said, but eventually, he won the case. The man had broken into our home, hidden in my closet, and tried to escape without ever being seen. Thanks to Callie, that didn't happen. My dad never told me exactly how much money he was awarded from the lawsuits, but he made one thing absolutely clear. Callie saved the day, saved us, and from that moment on, she wasn't just a pet. She was a hero. The first dog I ever had came into my life in 1992. I was 10 years old. After years of begging and pleading, my parents finally caved and let me get a German Shepherd, my dream dog. I'd been obsessed with them since I was little. Regal, strong, loyal, everything I imagined the perfect dog to be. There was just one condition. I had to walk him twice a day, no exceptions. Once in the afternoon, once at night. If I wanted to keep him, I had to prove I was responsible enough to care for him. His name was Calvin,
I loved him from the start. But I'll be honest, those nightly walks, they became a chore pretty quickly, especially in winter, especially on nights like this one. It was a bitter, snowy December evening, the kind where the wind bites at your face and the snow crunches like glass beneath your boots. I begged my dad to let me skip the walk just this once, just like Calvin out in the yard. But he wouldn't budge. He never did. "Get dressed," he said. "He needs the exercise, and you need the discipline." So I layered up. Snow boots, thick sweatshirt, heavy jacket, and finally my wool snow hat tugged down over my ears. I stepped outside, the cold slapping me awake. Calvin was already at the end of the leash, tail wagging, eager to go. We headed out into the neighborhood streets. The storm hadn't let up. Thick snowflakes fell fast and steady, blurring the edges of houses and trees. The air was silent, too silent. Not a single car on the roads, just white, endless white. Calvin pulled ahead like he always did, his head down, plowing through snowbanks like they weren't even there. We wandered down toward the edge of the neighborhood, where the houses gave way to trees. The woods stood like a black wall in the distance, half swallowed in the flurry. I remember wondering if any of the roads had been plowed yet, partly out of curiosity, partly just looking for signs of life. Eventually, we reached an intersection where two quiet streets met. No streetlights, no tire tracks, just untouched snow and the silent border of the forest pressing in on the edge of the neighborhood. Something about that spot felt too still. But we kept walking. That's when I ran into him. I heard it first, the crunch of footsteps behind me, deliberate and steady, pressing into the snow. Calvin turned before I did, his ears perked up, his body alert. He let out a couple of sharp barks, the sound echoing through the cold, quiet air. I spun around, heart picking up speed. A man stood there. He was bundled in snow gear from head to toe, thick coat, gloves, snow boots. A scarf covered the lower half of his face, so all I could really see were his eyes, narrowed beneath the rim of a snow-dusted beanie. Even through the layers, I could tell he was older, at least in his 40s, maybe older. Something about the way he stood, the weight in his movements. "Hey there," he called out, voice muffled through the scarf, but strangely chipper, too cheerful for a night like this. I didn't answer. Then he did something I didn't expect. He crouched down, scooped up a handful of snow, patted it into a loose snowball, and with an almost playful gesture, lobbed it at me. It missed, barely, and I instinctively stepped aside. I didn't know how to react. Was this supposed to be a joke? Was he trying to be funny? Friendly? Before I could say anything, he walked closer and reached out to pet Calvin. My dog didn't growl or resist, just stood still as the man scratched behind his ears and mumbled something under his breath. I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The whole thing felt off, forced. When the man finally stood up again, he placed a hand on my shoulder. His glove was heavy. The pressure of it made my skin crawl. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said softly. "Not on a night like this." I swallowed hard. "I'm not alone," I answered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I'm with my dog." He didn't say anything right away. There were more words exchanged, bits and pieces I don't clearly remember now. Small talk, questions maybe, nothing that mattered. What I do remember is eventually turning and walking away from him, without saying goodbye, without even trying to hide how uncomfortable I felt. I didn't look back, but Calvin did. Every few steps, he'd glance over his shoulder, ears pulled back slightly, like he was listening for something. And I heard it too. That soft, rhythmic crunch of boots in the snow, behind us again. He was following. I assumed he was just following me home. That was unsettling enough on its own, but it's why I wasn't prepared for what happened next. The sound of footsteps behind us suddenly changed, no longer slow and casual, but faster, louder, crunching through the snow with urgent weight. I barely had time to react before Calvin spun around, barking furiously, his body lunging between me and the noise. Then the man was on me. He grabbed me from behind, one thick arm locking around my chest, the other hand clamping tightly over my mouth. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a muffled gasp. My heart thundered, my legs kicked uselessly against the snow. Calvin launched at him. I could hear his teeth snapping, could feel the chaos of the struggle. But the man barely flinched. He was bundled in so many layers that Calvin's bites didn't stop him. Not at first. Still, Calvin didn't quit. The growls turned vicious, his barking frantic. The man's grip on me started to falter. I kicked at him again and again, desperate to break free, aiming at whatever I could reach. I could feel the panic rising in his body, the shift in his weight as Calvin's attacks became too much. Finally, he let go. With one last snarl from Calvin and a sharp shove from me, the man stumbled backward, then turned and bolted toward the trees. Calvin didn't hesitate. He lunged so hard that his leash snapped clean off his collar. 1 second he was beside me, and the next he was gone. A blur of motion disappearing into the woods after the man. I stood there screaming, his name tearing from my throat into the freezing air. Calvin, Calvin, come back! His barks echoed once, twice, then faded into the dark. I didn't know what to do. My legs were shaking, my hands were frozen. Tears were already streaming down my face before I even realized I was crying. I turned and ran home, choking out the story between sobs. He chased someone into the woods. He's gone. He's gone. My parents tried to calm me, tried to figure out what had happened, but none of it mattered in that moment. I stayed up the entire night by the front door, hoping for the sound of paws against the steps, hoping to see him come back out of that darkness. But he never did. Calvin was my first dog, and losing him like that was the first time in my life I understood what heartbreak really meant. Still, I try to believe in something better. I like to imagine someone found him, that maybe he ended up at a shelter, that he's out there somewhere, loved again. Because no matter what happened, I know Calvin saved my life that night, and I'll never forget that. I live out on a quiet farm in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. It's just me, my wife, and our infant son tucked away in this little patch of countryside. Oh, and our Rottweiler, Jesse. Jesse sleeps outside from May through October in his own doghouse, just a few feet from the back door. He's not just a pet, he's our first line of defense. His size alone is enough to make anyone think twice about creeping too close. But more importantly, it gives him the freedom to do his business without waking either of us in the middle of the night. To keep him safe, we've got a mount connected to his collar that attaches to the doghouse. Plenty of room to move around, but secure enough to make sure he can't run off or get lost. It's a system that's worked well for years. Most nights, he's quiet. Every now and then, very seldom, we'll hear him bark, and when he does, I always check. He's trained to bark only when something's truly off. He doesn't cry for attention, doesn't bark at rabbits or raccoons. When Jesse barks at night, something's wrong. That brings me to the night this all happened. It was around 1:30 a.m. when my wife and I woke up to Jesse's barking, loud, sharp, steady. It cut through the walls of the house like a warning siren. My wife sat up beside me, eyes wide. I told her to stay in bed, I'd check it out. I threw on my robe, slid into my boots, and headed outside. The night was cold and still. Moonlight shimmered faintly on the frost-covered grass, and the only sound was Jesse, standing stiff in the yard, barking toward the crops. He noticed me for a second, tail flicking once, but didn't stop. His body remained fixed in place, gaze locked on something I couldn't see, just past the rows of corn. I stood there for a moment, trying to follow his line of sight, but the crops were tall and the dark was thick. I realized I'd need more than just Jesse's instincts. I went back inside quickly, grabbed the flashlight and his leash, then returned to him. As soon as I clipped the leash onto his collar, his whole body tensed, not in fear, but readiness. He knew what it meant. Without hesitation, Jesse took the lead, his nose low, his body angled forward, pulling me gently toward the edge of the crops, into the dark. Jesse led me straight into the crops. I kept the flashlight pointed ahead, but given how dense and towering the corn was, all I could really see were thick stalks swaying gently around us, green and gold shadows brushing against my arms and face. The beam of light barely pierced the rows beyond. Everything felt tight and closed. The air between the stalks was colder somehow, heavier. Without hesitation, Jesse took the lead, his nose low, his body angled forward, pulling me gently toward the edge of the crops, into the dark. Jesse had stopped barking, but he hadn't slowed. His movements were purposeful, like he knew exactly where he was going. His body remained low and tense, sniffing the ground, guiding us deeper into the field with unwavering focus. Then, suddenly, he stopped. He stopped sniffing, stopped pulling, just stood there, rigid. He lifted his head and stared ahead. I tried to follow his gaze, but the corn was too tall, the view too obscured. I couldn't tell if he'd seen something, or heard something, or if he was just confused. We stood in silence, just me and Jesse, surrounded by rustling stalks and darkness. And then I heard it. A faint swishing, off to our right, like something brushing against the corn. Then again, to our left, close but not too close. Movement. Jesse's ears twitched, his head whipped left, then right, then back again. His whole body was alert, confused, his eyes darting like he was trying to pinpoint something moving all around us. Then he started barking again, loud, fierce, and this time he tried to lunge forward. But I yanked hard on the leash, pulling him back. "No," I hissed, trying to steady my own voice. "Stay." I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. My mouth was dry. My grip on the flashlight tightened. I stood there, staring into the shifting darkness, and forced myself to call out. "This is private property," I shouted, louder than I thought I could. "Anyone caught trespassing will be turned over to the police." That sentence took more out of me than it should have. Saying it out loud, making the fear real, was harder than I'd imagined. But what else was I supposed to do? What do you say when something feels off and you're standing in the middle of a cornfield at nearly 2 in the morning with your dog growling beside you? It felt surreal, like I wasn't even in my own body. And somewhere out there, just beyond the flashlight's reach, something was moving. And then it happened. A scream, sharp, raw, and wrong. It sliced through the night like a blade. It was a woman's scream, but not just any scream. It was manic, deranged, almost unhinged. It echoed through the cornfield, bouncing between the stalks, impossible to track. Jesse lunged forward immediately, yanking hard against the leash, barking like mad. Without thinking, I ran with him, stumbling through the rows as fast as I could, flashlight bouncing wildly in my hand. But no matter how fast we moved, the scream only grew fainter, drifting further and further away, like it was being pulled into the darkness by invisible hands. And then, just like that, it stopped. Silence again. Jesse froze in his tracks, panting hard, ears up. He was looking in every direction now, left, right, back over his shoulder. Whatever we were chasing, it had vanished. And then, something tore through the crops. The sound was sudden and violent, like someone sprinting full speed just a few feet away. The rustling stalks thrashed and parted, and I could actually see the movement just 5 feet in front of me. The corn swayed violently, clearing for a split second, like something or someone was slicing straight through it. They were right there. This time, I didn't hesitate. I dropped Jesse's leash and shouted, "Go! Get him!" He shot off like a bullet, disappearing into the shadows in a blur of black and muscle. His barking grew fainter with each second, swallowed by the thick maze of corn. And just like that, I was alone, standing in the middle of the field, in the dark, flashlight shaking in my hand. I didn't move, couldn't. My body was locked up with fear. I felt like a kid again, hiding in the dark, convinced something was in the closet. Only now, I was outside, and the thing I was afraid of was real. I crouched down instinctively, trying to make myself smaller, quieter. I held my breath and barely even blinked. Any movement felt dangerous, like the sound of one snapped stalk could give away my position. Then, the worst moment of my life. Behind me, just inches away, I heard a faint swish, the unmistakable sound of corn being brushed aside. And then, fingers. A hand clamped down on my right shoulder. Not a gentle tap, not some accidental brush. It grabbed me, tight, sudden, and unforgiving. The fingers dug in, squeezing hard, painfully hard. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was right behind me. I screamed, loud and primal, and without daring to look back, I ran. I tore through the rows of corn, pushing past stalks that clawed at my face and arms, heart hammering like it was trying to escape my chest. I aimed in the direction I was pretty sure would lead me home, maybe 90% sure. It was the fastest I'd ever run in my life. Somewhere behind me, I could still hear Jesse barking, faint now, distant, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. As much as I hated leaving him out there, I wasn't going back into that darkness. And then, like a miracle, I saw it. The roof of my house came into view, peeking over the edge of the field. I broke through the last row of corn, stumbling out onto the back lawn, gasping for breath. My legs burned, my skin stung, but I didn't stop. I passed the old oak tree in the yard, ran straight past Jesse's doghouse, and flung open the back door. Once inside, I slammed it shut and locked it. Then I ran from door to door, window to window, double-checking every latch, every deadbolt, every lock. The entire house needed to feel sealed, airtight. My wife came out of the bedroom, half asleep, holding our son. I told her as little as I could. Enough to explain, not enough to terrify. I said there was someone, maybe more than one person, out in the crops. She paled, but to her credit, she stayed calm. Together, we called the sheriff's office. Then, we waited. For nearly an hour, we sat in silence, watching the windows, listening for any sound, any knock, any footstep, hoping Jesse would come back. Every creak of the house made us flinch. Every gust of wind against the siding felt like something was still out there. And then, we heard it. Pause on the back deck. The deputy's headlights swung across the yard as his cruiser rolled up the dirt road to our house, and in that glow, we saw Jesse, sitting calmly at the back door, chest rising and falling. A little muddy, a little tired, but alive. We let him in immediately. The deputy got out, took my statement, wrote everything down. But he was honest, said there wasn't much he could do without more information. And no, he wasn't about to go stumbling through a pitch-black cornfield in the middle of the night. Can't say I blamed him. Jesse slept inside for the next few nights. We didn't even debate it. For his sake, for ours, he stayed curled up right by the bedroom door. Almost a week passed after that. Quiet, uneventful. Eventually, things returned to normal as they could anyway. The memory still lingers, of course, that cold, crushing grip on my shoulder, the scream, the feeling of being hunted in your own backyard. But no, nothing like that has happened since, and God willing, it never will again.